You've probably heard of postpartum depression, maybe the baby blues, but mental health and motherhood is so much more than that. From postpartum anxiety to intrusive thoughts to just managing the huge identity shift that comes with motherhood. We're going to get into all of that with Jen Mendoza, a licensed clinical social worker and a specialist in pregnancy, postpartum, and perinatal mental health. Not only that, but she's also a mom to 3 little ones. She's navigated the challenges involved in motherhood firsthand, and now she's helping others through it. We're going to get her perspective on what moms and their partners should look out for, what it means to build up the right support post-birth, and so much more. This is Getting Started with Baby, the podcast that brings you practical tips, loved products, and lived experience from parents who've been there. Brought to you by thestarterset.com, an upcoming service focused on helping parents find just the right things at the right time, personalized for their families. I'm your host, Jane Deshefsky, a mom on the other side of 2 under 2. I'm still actively figuring all this out, and I'm bringing you perspectives from across the parenting spectrum. By the way, if you like what you hear, leave us a review or follow the podcast to help us keep growing. Let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, to get started, could you share a little bit about your background and your family?
Yeah, like you said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am in private practice now, and my practice really specializes in supporting women through pregnancy, postpartum, early motherhood. On the personal side, I'm a mom of 3. My kids are 5, 3, and 1. So I am very much in the thick of early motherhood myself. Yeah.
Sound like you have your hands full.
Oh, so full. It's like every day is wild and chaotic, but really good too, So it's really fun. One of my little ones actually has a rare genetic disorder. So she's medically complex. And so that adds a layer to our family that's a little bit different. But we're so grateful that she's well and she's healthy. And that journey specifically is just really woven into why I ended up opening this practice and focusing on the things that I focus on.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into that. How did you get into this particular specialty?
So prior to specializing in perinatal mental health, I was already a therapist. My career was working for the military, actually. So I worked with active duty service members and their spouses. While I really loved what I was doing working for the military, it just, once I went through my own healing, it just lit such a fire in me to want to support moms going through this a lot of what I went through, So that's when I pivoted and I really dove headfirst into perinatal mental health specialty. And
At what point in your motherhood journey did you decide to make that pivot?
I always describe my experience as I've become kind of an expert in complicated motherhood journeys. From the very beginning, my husband and I were married for over 10 years before we had our first child. So we struggled with infertility. We had to do IVF. And it almost feels like as moms or as women, when we go through these really difficult experiences and then we get this pregnancy, we're like, okay, the hard part is over. The struggle is over. Like everything's going to be quote unquote normal from here on out. And and maybe for some people it is, but unfortunately for me, it wasn't. And the complicated nature of my motherhood journey continued. And I've went on to have a traumatic birth experience and did a lot of work and healing from that. And then I've had 2 subsequent children since that initial infertility and IVF experience. And so walking into having a second baby and unknowingly in the early postpartum experience, realizing that there was more going on than typical like feeding struggles, essentially. And that led us down this path of procedures and specialists and diagnosis and all sorts of things until we got to this place of like, okay, we have this unexpected journey of a child with a rare genetic disorder and now complex medical needs. And that was like a whole other beast that then led me to struggling with postpartum anxiety, which was such a surprise to me because again, I'm a mom. I've had one kid and that was hard. And now that I'm going to do it again, I've learned so much, right? I'm going to go into this so much more prepared, and really so much more confident the second time around. But when you have a postpartum experience that just really rocks you, nothing can really prepare you for that. So yeah, just this complicated motherhood experience has just followed me. And so that's why I said I specialize in this through lived experience and then really just taking all of that, everything I've learned, and just allowing that to fuel the work that I do now with moms on their own complicated motherhood journeys.
So one of the things you talked about too, I think this affects a lot of moms, no matter how they come to be pregnant, what they
Mhm.
expected it to be like. Remember, like, oh, we wanted the baby so bad, and then you have the baby. And I remember those first few weeks, I was like, I think we ruined our lives. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that was something we had wanted the baby so badly, and what that was such a surprising feeling. What kind of advice do you have for moms as they're kind of going through and trying to reconcile these expectations with their reality?
Yeah. And I just want to say like that experience that you had is so common, it's just so common and it's so hard I think for us as moms because when you want this so badly and you're finally there and your reality is so different than what you expected, it is so jarring, right? And when moms go through these experiences, I think the biggest thing is recognizing that we as moms put so much pressure on ourselves to be a certain way, or we have this expectation of how we're going to feel in motherhood. And then you have this added noise, I'm going to call it noise, right? From society or social media, the groups that we're in. I don't know if you did this, but I joined like all the due date groups,
Oh, yeah.
for the first pregnancy, and then I did
Yeah.
not for the subsequent.
Oh, and those horrible ones where the pregnancy test line ones, those ones are
Oh
bad too.
boy, those are bad.
Uh,
The expectations that we put on ourselves in motherhood are so real. And I don't know about you, but I did not start in motherhood. For me, that was just so deep seated. Well, even prior to motherhood, I'm that person that's going to research and
oh,
I'm going
yeah.
to read the books and I'm going to listen to the podcast and I'm going to be so prepared for this new job. And the difficult thing is that there's so much about motherhood that is so out of our control, right? That no matter how much we prep and prepare, and we plan and think about, we may not have control over how it goes from like our birth experience to postpartum time. Feeding journeys can really bring out a lot of stress and tension when it doesn't go like we'd like it to go.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing about us moms is we are really good at turning on ourselves. Like, I should be able to do this better. I should be enjoying this more, right? We see these images, like these perfectly curated social media posts. When we don't have that experience, when we are over here just surviving or just trying to make it through this really crazy thing that we just went through. And now we have this newborn baby who we don't really know them that well. And yeah, we love them, but like, what did I just do? We were living a totally fine life. And
Oh, yeah.
now we're not
Yep.
sleeping. We're eating trash. When did I shower last? It is so real and so heavy to have these, what I'm going to call intrusive thoughts, these unwanted, negative, scary, dark thoughts about what we're going through. It can be uh, about the health of our baby or safety of our baby or even our health. Two things can be true at the same time. We can have really been longing for it, wanting this baby so badly, and it can be really, really hard and maybe the hardest thing we've ever done.
I think that is a very true statement. And there's always that duality in it. I would love to come back to something that you were saying about, the preparedness and the pressure that moms put on themselves to get it right. What are the things that you wish, having worked with a lot of moms, having experienced rebirths and post-birth periods yourself, what do you wish that moms were really better prepared for versus the things they think they're preparing for?
I think for a lot of the moms that I work with, when I start working with them in postpartum, often what I hear is like, I was so focused on preparing for the birth the birth plan and like, what do I want this experience to look like? And I didn't spend as much time preparing for postpartum. That is something that when I'm lucky enough to work with a mom while she's pregnant, yes, I want to talk about the birth. Let's talk about what your preferences are and what you'd like for this to look like. And that is so important. It's valid to want to plan and prepare for that. I don't want to miss this huge opportunity to really plan for this postpartum time, not just the early postpartum, not just the first 6 weeks, not just the fourth trimester, but really expanding out to like the first like 1 to 2 years. What is this time going to look like for us? So yes, let's plan for early postpartum. Let's get the supports in place. Because one of the things that I find so often with the moms that I work with is we just do not have enough support. Without having these supports, it just makes it more difficult. It just adds to the heaviness and feelings of who am I and the identity shift that is going to be an ongoing process for us. And also the loneliness and isolation of feeling like, what is wrong with me that I feel this way in this postpartum time? So let's plan for that. And also what that looks like is not just planning for the physical supports, right? So we want to talk about meals. We want to talk about what rest and recovery is going to look like, all of those things, right? But also planning for our postpartum mental health so that if I'm feeling XYZ way, do I already have the knowledge like this is a typical normal postpartum adjustment? Or is this maybe something else? Am I maybe looking at postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression? Like, what are the resources that I can tap into to help me with that?
I've talked to so many moms who, in retrospect, but not while they were going through it, realized that, oh, they felt like they actually had a pretty traumatic birth and were carrying that around for a while, or they realized many months afterwards that they were actually suffering from postpartum anxiety. Some of these things you don't even know to ask questions about or to look for. So, what do you do in that situation? How do you start thinking about that even as you're pregnant?
And I think the reality is that for most of us, when we are in this postpartum time, and if we are struggling, we are often not going to be the one that's waving the white flag and saying, actually, I think that this is more than just the baby blues, or I think this is more than just a normal postpartum adjustment thing. It's most often going to be the people around us, our partners, if we're partnered, our support people, our family, our friends, who are those people in our circle that know us really well, especially from pregnancy or even pre-pregnancy. Those are the people that are often going to notice that something else is going on first. And so I'm a big fan of having these conversations with our support person, whether it's our partner or our family, really being able to have these conversations of this is what I'm hearing is the normal postpartum experience. For example, baby blues, right? Baby blues is a normal postpartum experience that can happen within the first 2 weeks. And it can almost feel like a mini postpartum depression. We may be extra tearful. We may feel like we're having difficulty regulating ourselves. Maybe we're having more like irritation and just feeling more on edge. And the cause of that, it's believed to be part of this really intensive hormone drop after we give birth. And just, of course, add in the sleeplessness at learning this new
Right.
baby. So that is not considered a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. This is considered more in like the realm of normal. But anything outside that first 2 week window, if we are continuing to struggle or if those symptoms exasperate or get worse, it's not baby blues. We're looking at something that's maybe more in the world of a perinatal mental health issue or postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression. And one thing that I'm finding is there can be this gap where a lot of moms, they don't know or they haven't heard about how postpartum anxiety is honestly something that I see so much of. I see more, honestly, in my practice than postpartum depression. Partners and our family members, hey, these are the signs and symptoms. So if I am struggling, you know, what are some way having these conversations? What are some ways that you can communicate that with me? Like if I'm talking to my partner, I think if you approached me from this place of, hey, I'm seeing XYZ things, I'm worried about you. I think it would be a good idea to talk to somebody just to see if you could benefit from talking to a therapist or a provider about what's going on. Are you open to that? If you feel like you're struggling, if you feel like you need help, truthfully, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it is postpartum anxiety, depression, I don't care what it is, you deserve support. You don't have to get to the point of struggling so badly that you are just absolutely burnt out and barely making it through the day. You don't have to get that to that point to seek out help. So I'm actually a big fan of, let's identify some support people. And I do this with the pregnant moms that I work with. Even if you don't start working with a therapist, which great if you do, that way you have some FaceTime, even if you do 1 or 2 sessions during your pregnancy, that way, if I'm struggling in postpartum, easy peasy, I have somebody that I know I can reach out to and get back on their schedule. But even if we don't take that full step, even just going on the website, a lot of therapists these days will offer free consultations so that you can figure out, would this be a good fit to work together? That way you have a few names. And if you are now in postpartum and realizing it might be a good idea to talk to somebody, you don't have to then be trying to do research to find a therapist in that level of hard sleep deprivation when you're just trying to get through the day.
I love what you said about making sure that you have support people around you who are also able to recognize. One thing that I've heard a lot from people who've gone through postpartum anxiety is they really didn't know to recognize a sign as
Mhm.
postpartum anxiety. And I don't know that their partner knew either. So I'd love to double click on what are some of the signs that you're now not in a normal area of worry.
Yeah. And I think this is also part of why it's so hard for us to seek help in postpartum if we do struggle with anxiety, because it almost feels like, okay, of course, I have this new baby. Of course, I'm going to be worried about how they're doing. Of course, I'm worried about how much they're eating. Of course, I'm worried about, are they breathing while they're sleeping? And there's definitely a time in postpartum where, especially in the beginning, as we are getting adjusted to our baby and learning our baby, where in the beginning, this worry is valid, right? We're trying to figure this out. And I don't know about your babies, but babies make some funky noises when they're first born.
Oh, like little dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah. It's like, what is going on over there? Are they okay? Are they good? And once we familiarize ourselves with our baby, right? And once they get a little bit older too, it's like, okay, that kind of stuff levels out for a lot of babies, right? Some signs that a mom might be struggling beyond the normal postpartum adjustment or normal worry are things like if they are constantly worrying, right? So if it's happening throughout the day, various topics, if they're feeling like they're having racing thoughts, if they're feeling constantly on edge. Another big sign is if they're having trouble with sleep or rest, even when their baby's sleeping, right? So something about a mom being early postpartum, baby's napping, but then the mom is really preoccupied with like, okay, let me do the dishes and clean because they just are on a motor, right? Like
Is
they
that
just
not normal? Is that not a normal thing? Oh,
yeah. I would really prefer for this to be like a restful period, right? However, our babies were born, we went through a lot to have this baby. And yeah, it should be the time that we're resting. It should be the time that we're recovering. But if a mom is feeling like, I just can't even slow down enough to actually rest, feeling disconnected from your baby, or even not finding joy in the things that you used to do. The other part of the anxiety piece is that it can also look like irritability, rage, feeling more on edge. And then the other thing I mentioned earlier, intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts can be a symptom of anxiety or even perinatal OCD, which is an anxiety disorder. So, intrusive thoughts are these unwanted, scary thoughts that can come into our mind in this postpartum time. Things like I'm walking down the stairs holding my baby, and I have this thought pops into my mind like, oh, what if I drop the baby? Or just having worries or fears or thoughts about something bad happening to the baby or you accidentally harming the baby or something. These intrusive thoughts can also be scary images. And this is very destabilizing for postpartum parents. And the research shows that it's actually very common. Honestly, most parents have some level of intrusive thoughts in postpartum, and we will see that happening, especially in the early postpartum time. But if it is persisting, and let's say we are now a couple months out and this is still happening and it's taking up a lot of time of our day, we're spending a lot of time either trying to push the thoughts away or getting sucked in by those intrusive thoughts, that is also going to be another warning sign. This is more than just a normal postpartum adjustment.
so let's say that you or your partner have noticed that some signs are starting to seem outside of what you would expect from just a general postpartum period, and they're seeking out help? What can they expect?
I really encourage pregnant and postpartum uh, individuals to seek out somebody with experience and expertise in this perinatal time. I just think it's really important because those of us with perinatal training or certification in perinatal mental health, we have training that helps us tease out while we're working with clients what is going on for this person? What are these scary thoughts? Is it related to X diagnosis? And we're trained in how to help clients through this. I'm a big fan of Postpartum Support International. It's an organization where they have a helpline and you also access free support groups. And they have a directory that's full of therapists, psychologists, prescribers that really specialize in perinatal and postpartum mental health. They either have extensive training or they're certified in perinatal and postpartum mental health. And so I feel like that's just such a great resource. So many women I work with have been the fixer, the problem solver, the person that's doing it all. And I really want for them to have this experience that in the therapy room can be a place where they can be met exactly where they're at. I've met with people like a day postpartum, and babies are welcome in a session. I've done sessions with moms in their bed, nursing their baby, feeding their babies. I've done sessions with moms after they've gone back to work and they're heading out to their car during their lunch break so that we can have a therapy session. For me, it's really about come as you are. I will hold space for you so that you can share these heavy things that you're thinking about and going through without worrying that you're going to be judged or criticized or met with anything but empathy and validation. And also, in my practice, what's really important is like a trauma-informed approach to help you work through those things and get back to a more regulated nervous system.
One thing that you mentioned too is that a lot of times you're talking to people who are coming in and they have this identity of like fixer and problem solver and all of this. And, one thing that's true, whatever your experience of pregnancy is, that the before and the after of having a child it really changes a lot of things, right? It can really change your self-perception. Certainly your relationship can be impacted. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that and if you have any advice for mom navigating that shift.
Yeah. And I really think this time can feel really destabilizing because of of those things that you mentioned. And because there isn't enough information that helps us recognize that really this entrance into motherhood is more than just, okay, you've got a baby, you're good to go. We need to start looking at motherhood as a developmental phase. And there's this word that's been coined. I don't know if you've heard of it, matrescence. Have you heard this word before?
Loosely.
Yeah. So this word that we're trying to make become a thing to really describe this developmental period, similar to, let's say, adolescence. And adolescence, we are going through hormone changes, identity shifts. We've got a name for it. We know how to describe this. We know what to expect. And similarly, this entrance into motherhood is a time of matrescence. It's this transformational journey of our identity, our relationships, right? Like so much about our lives has changed completely, so much about ourselves. And if we can really start to view this time as this developmental phase of life where so much of who we are is changing, this is a big identity shift, and recognizing that we may have unrealistic expectations of what that is going to look like. If we expect for us to be fully in our mom era, by the time we go back to work or after that fourth trimester, we are going to be set up to be disappointed because for so many of us, we are just like crawling out of the pits of newborn life after 12 weeks postpartum, right? Or even further than that, right? Depending on how it's gone. We really need to view this as such a big shift that lasts the first 1 to 2 years after we're having a baby, and that we are going to go through this again if we choose to have subsequent children. It's going to be its own unique experience all over again because each baby has their own temperament. Each feeding journey is going to be so different, right?
Hearing you talk about matrescence like adolescence, it makes so much sense. I don't know why we don't talk about it. You guys should make this happen because that seems really obvious now that you said it. People talk about getting back to yourself, bouncing back, right? We use all that terminology. Is there a getting back and a bouncing back, or is it just something different?
Yeah. I mean, uh, believe this is just my opinion. I don't really think there's such a thing as getting back to who we were before in every sense. But I don't think that that's a bad thing. I really do think that motherhood changes us in every way. And instead of trying to get back to who I was, how can we get to know this new version of ourselves? How can we meet ourselves with more compassion? How can we shift that focus to really just being present to the time and the season that we're in now? I think that focusing on bouncing back can really also set us up for disappointment. For example, if part of this is about body image, I'm a big fan of when you're in the postpartum time, please box up all your pre-pregnancy clothes. That if we can just reframe this idea of getting back to who we were, bouncing back, I think it would save a lot of grief, even figuring out what makes us feel good now. Maybe prior to becoming a mom, so this is true for me, I really enjoyed yoga classes, right? That was that might not be what I'm able to do now for my self-care, but that doesn't mean that I can't do anything, right? So really just figuring out what makes me feel good now, what makes me feel fulfilled. If I really enjoyed going out on date nights with my partner, but we're thick in postpartum season, how can we still make time for connection without having to find the sitter and do all the things if we're not ready to do that just yet? So it's really just meeting ourselves where we're at in this moment.
That's super good advice to keep front of mind because so much of that disappointed feeling comes with not setting yourself up appropriately for success or trying to hold on to something in the past. So, switching tacks a little bit, this podcast is brought to us by a company called The Starter Set, which is an upcoming service that is focused on helping parents find just the right things at the right time for their families. And so I'd love to hear just from you, from your experience as a mom of three. Is there anything that you feel like was just a game changer for you in your experience that you'd recommend to other parents?
Yeah, I think the best product or service that you can invest in is support. So whether it's a birth or a postpartum doula, a meal delivery service, or finding your professional support team, whether that's a therapist or a chiropractor, or what is it that you need? I really think these things that help us take care of ourselves in postpartum and that also can take something off our plate, especially when we are in the thick of it, those things are really just worth their weight in gold for postpartum parents.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about having that postpartum support plan and thinking about that even as you're pregnant. What about things that you think that parents seem to gravitate towards that might not be as necessary?
Some of the things that I find to be tricky for new parents are things like the owlet sock, the heart rate monitors, and that kind of stuff. I've seen this lead to a lot of anxiety in new parents. And so I'm not here to knock it and say, don't do it, but I just want people to be mindful of what are my tendencies? What's my temperament? Do I tend to lean on the anxious side? Is this going to be something that's really helpful for me? And then I'll hear people say, "And I've got a medically complex kiddo." So it's like, fair. There are some situations where we want extra vigilance over certain things. Like we had a baby in the NICU, all those things, those are valid questions. And I think really talking to your care providers, your baby's care team, if a certain product is going to be absolutely necessary, having some good discernment over, is this product going to help me or is all of this information going to stress me out more? Similarly, these apps that can track all the bowel movements and the diapers and when we fed them and for how long on each side and how many ounces, right? If it's helpful, because I've been there, I've done that, right? If it's helpful, great. Do it. Maybe we have multiple caregivers and it's a helpful tool for communicating between all of the loved ones that are caring for baby. But really just taking a minute to slow down and recognizing, are we putting so much into this app that it's causing us anxiety when we don't log things? Are we getting upset at our partner because you missed this and this is really important to me? Just trying to slow down and figure out is all of this data actually helpful for me, or is it increasing my anxiety?
Yeah, I think you mentioning that you have to think about your own temperament when you're adding some of these new layers of technology that exist to
Yes.
support you. The one that you said about the app, the tracking the feeds and the poops and whatever. Well, I was sort of like smiling through that because I remember this one for me was one of those wildly different things between baby one and baby two. Baby one, I was very type A about it. Everybody had to enter it. If someone didn't enter it, I was, like, really upset about how are we not tracking this, and baby too, it was like, I made people do that? You've experienced 3 kids, 3 different needs. What do you think, one of the most surprising things to you from child to child?
Yeah, I think for me, I've definitely had very wildly different experiences from pregnancies, birth, and like postpartum with each child. I will say for me, my first two experiences were hard in different ways. And I had my third baby. My baby is 19 months old. So it's really not all that long ago, but I will say it was my most pleasant and grounded postpartum experience because I was like, I need to practice what I preach. I need to look at my postpartum plan that I give out to my clients and really start chipping away at these things. And I really found that having that support was such a game changer for me. That support in postpartum, even through my birth, was so helpful. Being a mom of three, just seeing how different each baby is. Some babies were really chill. One of my babies was not that chill. Each experience is so different. And really just grounding myself and helping my clients ground themselves. What is our core task here in this postpartum time? My job is to really be present and attuned to my baby. Even in those hard days where it's like there's nothing I could do to soothe my crying baby. All I could do was just sit on this yoga ball and just hold them and try to soothe them. But that's enough. That's important. Your baby feels you connecting with them, feels you attuning with them, even if you weren't able to get them to stop crying. You're still there. You're still present with that. And I always hope moms take away that message. You know your baby best. There's so much out there, advice, opinions, pressure, and it can really just make you second guess yourself in all aspects. But underneath all of that, even underneath your uncertainty, you can find that your intuition as a mom is still there, and that you don't need to show up perfectly, right? No, that is impossible. None of us are perfect in this. But you just need to do it in a way that feels true to you and feeling grounded and like, I know my baby best and I just need to be here with them.
Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing your experiences. If you like what you heard, please leave us a review or follow the podcast to stay up to date on new episodes. Know someone else who could use the episode? Please pass it on. Interested to hear more or get in touch with Jen? Reach out via her website, motherthrivetherapy.com, or follow her on Instagram at motherthrivetherapy. Links in the episode description. If you have topics you'd like us to cover, you can find us on Instagram at thestarterset_baby or reach out via info@thestarterset.com. Thank you for listening. Till next time.